All right, everybody, welcome to This Week in Housing San Diego, May 29th. Joined this week by Mark Matthess. Mark was supposed to be with us last week, had some stuff pop up. He was gracious enough to reschedule and come back. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's get going. Mark, I'm bringing you in here in a few. I want to cover some of the basics with the economy, unemployment. All right, so we have the newest U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics weekly unemployment filings are out. So we're going to be able, now we have a lot of data, we're going to be able to start comparing and contrasting. So this first graph, the chart that's going to come across, we have two different sets of numbers. The numbers on the bottom, those are the raw number of unemployment filings per week. The green on top is the accumulative filings. All right, so we can see that the newest number that came in, 2.1 million earlier this morning. We're continuing to see the downward trend in new unemployment filings. If we check out the green, we can see that we have largely started to taper off also in the total number of filings. All right, so this is kind of a bigger picture view of what's going on. All right, now when we take a complete look at all the unemployment numbers, we're going to get a little bit of an interesting picture here. So the dark blue is going to be the cumulative new filings. The light blue is going to be the current people collecting unemployment insurance. All right, so what we have, looking at, Mark, can you hit the mute button on yours real quick?
Sure.
All right, thank you. All right, I was getting a little bit of feedback there. All right, so here's what we have. We have the cumulative new filings, right, starting from March 21st all the way through the most recent report. And we can see that the number is 3.3 to 10.2 million people unemployed, 16.8, 22. We're at 40.7 million people that don't have a job, all right? When we compare that, though, to the light blue, these are the people that are currently collecting. So we do see that on the week of May 9th, we hit our peak with the people that are actually collecting the unemployment benefits. We can see that as of the week of May 16th, that started to decrease. The number from this week has not been released yet. So what we can see here is that we are now starting onto what appears to be the downward trend. People are starting to go back to work. Now, there's a lot of different numbers that's being put into this. This isn't just simply the delta between, let's say, 38.6 million and 21.1 million. It's not simply saying that 17.5 million people have gone back to work. There's a lot that's going into this. All right, and part of this is going to be relayed to us here in the Becker-Friedman Institute of Economics study out of the University of Chicago. Some very, very interesting data here. 68% of the unemployed workers who are eligible for unemployment insurance will receive benefits that exceed their lost earnings. That means they just got a pay raise. 20% of the eligible unemployed workers will receive benefits at least 2 times as large as their lost earnings. So we have 88% of the people that are on unemployment have received a raise because of it. That is not a good situation. The CARES Act actually provides income expansion rather than the replacement for most unemployed workers. And so when we go back and we take a look at this guy, doggone it. There we go. When we take a look at this, right, is this number going to continue to drop as rapidly? When we have a tremendously large number of people, 88%, that have gotten a raise out of this, what's their incentive to go back to work? It's a good question. All right, so moving on from there, here's a quote from Lisa Yang, Goldman Sachs equity analyst. The current crisis will accelerate the shift from offline to online music, resulting in an almost quadrupling of streaming revenue by 2030, from 20 billion to 75 billion. What that means is businesses are actively working to reevaluate and recreate themselves as this economy continues to shift. It's continuing to drop. We're seeing the unemployment, but we're also seeing businesses coming back to life. Right? So this is another interesting data point. Right? So when is the economy going to recover? Right? If we're going to take a look at a couple quotes from Chris Hizzy, Chief Investment Officer for Merrill Lynch, right? Weekly jobless claims released May 21, so that was a week ago, total nearly 2.4 million, yet continuing claims workers already unemployed are receiving ongoing benefits have leveled off. That means workers are coming back into the economy, whether temporary or full-time, are at the same levels as those going out. That was as of last week. That's a very important data point right there, ladies and gentlemen. All right, the next one, we fully expect the economy could begin to pick up in late June or July with a strong recovery into the fourth quarter. All right, remember, January, February, March, Q1, April, May, June, Q2, right? So they're saying they might start to see this V-shaped recovery as early as the very end of Q2. July is the beginning of Q3. More good news. All right, when we take a look at the GDP graph, so this is the one that we have been showing for the entire time we've been doing the show. All I've done now is simply pulled out the Q1 and the Q2. So these are looking at the projections for Q3 and for Q4. Right, so these are the 5 main financial houses: Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. They are all more or less in agreement. The only one who's disagreeing with an increase in GDP in Q3 is Bank of America. All 5 agree that it is going to have a nice solid increase in Q4. Bank of America is actually predicting the largest of the increases in GDP, where they were predicting a slightly negative in Q3. So when you have all of the major financial institutions, when you have Merrill Lynch, when you have the Wall Street Journal, all in agreement, that's a wonderful sign. All right, so here's the Wall Street Journal survey of economists. All right, this was how quickly do you think we're going to recover? All right, so 3.3% said in Q2 of this year. Okay, that would be wonderful. 65.6% said in Q3, 19.7% in Q4, and you can see the rest rolling out. 85.3% of the economists that were surveyed believe that the recovery is going to start the beginning of the second half of 2020. That's what we're looking at. More great news. All right, so when we take a look at the Federal Reserve banks, their May report, 75% of the job losses are either temporary layoffs or furloughs, according to employers. The result aligns with news reports of large-scale hirings at firms like Amazon, Walmart, CVS, healthcare, Domino's Pizza, etc., other companies that are seeing a major increase in demand in reaction to this pandemic and the partial shutdown. Here's the last thing to do with the economy that we're going to talk about today. This is Jan Kiffen. He's the CEO of the J. Rogers Sniffen WWE. Why retail could actually see a V-shaped recovery after all? That was the big question mark. What's retail going to do? How soon can people go back to stores? How comfortable are they going to be? With what we've seen over the last week or two, now the V-shaped recovery specific to retail is starting to come into play. All right, so that's a wrap up on the economy. Mark, I'm going to bring you in now. So go ahead and hit the unmute button if you would, and break it down for us, Mark. What do you got for us today?
Well, I got a number of stuff I'd like to talk about. I know we had at our Rotary meeting, we had Mr. McAllister, our tax guru down here, and he seemed a little optimistic, but he made a couple of comments that I disagree with, and I'll get back to that.
Okay.
Let me start by saying that I don't have an MBA from Wharton School of Business or, Harvard or Yale, but I have been in this profession for just about 50 years now. So I've pretty much done it through from A to Z, and gone through about 4 of these recessions. So I'll give you my take. I work very closely with investors and major home builders, private and public. My firm specializes in acquisition and disposition of land for the major developers and investors. So I'm not active like you are in the single family arena. I did that for many, many years, but I think we're currently in a recession. If you look at the numbers, if you look at the unemployment numbers and where the market is right now, we have to call it a recession. I don't think we're in a depression with real estate, nothing like the big one we had in 2008, 2007. Home construction has plunged. in April, I think, to its lowest level in about 5 years. Groundbreaking last April dropped 30%. This is probably the lowest level since 2015. Construction new homes dropped 25% in the same period. Some of the builders I'm in touch with, more of your private builders, are kind of on a holding pattern right now because they're investor driven to provide the equity for them. And a number of them are sitting on the sidelines and just want to see, how quickly the economy recovers. Um, Public home builders, they seem to be a little more optimistic. They're sitting on a boatload of cash, and they are looking for some really good opportunities, uh, especially the luxury market. The move up hasn't been impacted as much, especially areas along San Diego coastal and Orange County in some areas. I was talking to the vice president of Brookfield Homes the other day, and they had over 200 people one day on one of their projects. So he says, and our sales are good considering the circumstances. So it kind of depends who you talk to. I think, I'm a little concerned about how quickly we will recover, and I'll get into that shortly. Um, Home qualifying is a little more challenging now. You mentioned some big lenders out there, and some of those lenders out now, from what I read, are looking for close to a 700 FICO score. So you've got to have pretty good credit right now. And these banks now, if you're working, these banks now are calling your employer up until the day of funding, the day before funding, just to see if you're still working. So that's changed. A little more challenging, but if you've got good credit, you have cash, could be some good opportunities out there. I'm not as optimistic about how quickly we're going to recover, and let me explain my feeling on that. First of all, there's three businesses that I think are going to be impacted, and I'll go through actually four. Movie theaters could be a thing of the past. They are impacted now. You can't get in them, and I think with everybody staying home right now, and these production companies are now streaming directly rather than going through, first run movies at the theaters. So people are getting used to that, and I think we're going to see more of those first run streaming right into your home. So I think that is definitely going to impact the movie industry. Brick and mortar. Some of these big brick and mortar retailers are in trouble. J.C. Penney, Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom, Pier 1, Victoria's Secret, they've all filed BK and trying to get reorganized. Your office space is another area I think is going to get hit. One employer I was talking to has got about 20,000 square feet. All his employees are home right now, and his business has not been impacted. And he's excited about that. And he said, listen, when my lease is up, I'm not going to renew it. I don't need 20,000 square feet. My guys are doing great at home, and we'll definitely downsize. I think we're going to see more of that. So I think a lot of these office spaces could be turned into, maybe multi-use, multi-tenant, mixed use. That's something we need to keep an eye on. Some of the smaller residential income properties, I think, could be impacted if the landlord doesn't get some relief and some of these tenants continue to stop paying rent. They could be in trouble. So we're keeping an eye on that. I do have a couple of very deep pocket investors, and they're waiting. They think there's going to be some very good opportunities coming up later this year and into 2021, more in the commercial sector. Mm-hmm. I'm more optimistic in the residential sector. Everybody has to have a home to live in. So, like I said, if you've got good credit and you've got the cash to put down, I think you're going to do fine. I know here in Carlsbad, where I live along the coast, sales have been pretty brisk. So that's a good sign. Um, getting this is interesting. You started off saying that some people are making more money staying home than working, and that's true. We've seen a number of people that are getting don't have the incentive. They're saying, "Why should I go back to work?" My brother calls it catch-22. I call it socialism. When you think about it, you know. So again, fortunately, it's temporary, and at some point they need to go back to work if their work is available. But we are going to see some high unemployment numbers for a while. Um, so I'm just not as optimistic about seeing a quick recovery. Third quarter, I think some businesses are going to take a little longer to recoup. One of them are your restaurants. Yes, they're all starting to open up right now, but the way the spacing criteria is, you're probably only going to get about half the amount of people that they were accustomed to. So that's less revenue. And a lot of those employees won't be coming back to a job. And one employer I was talking to said, you can't just turn the lights on and say we're open. He said there's a whole set of protocol you have to go through, before we can open. And you got to do all the face masks and the spacing. I got to move tables around. I got to get rid of tables. So, and he says, and my employees took off. Some of them went back east to go home with their folks. So, I don't know if I can get them back. I may have to hire new people. So these are things that that are going to slow, I think, the recovery down a little bit. But the silver lining is we've got the clearest skies we've ever seen in decades. So hopefully that's not a bad thing. But lastly, though, getting back to Mr. McAllister, our tax collector, he just said a couple of things. He thought things would back to normal, our employment would get back down to where it was, and unfortunately, I think he's a little overly optimistic on that. I don't really see any great recovery in the third quarter. I think we'll see some good, much better numbers in the fourth quarter, but it's not going to happen overnight. And I think with this virus, with this COVID-19, I don't think we're going to see the old norm, if we ever see it at all, until we get a vaccine. And once we have a proven vaccine out there, everybody's going to feel good about getting out, spending money, buying things. So the commercial sector, yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I think there's going to be some great opportunities out there. But residential, I'm more optimistic, like you.
Well, all right.
So if you have any questions,
yeah,
I'm happy to answer.
Well, all right. Well, let me get into a little bit of what you were saying there. So the not as optimistic with the commercial. So the movie theaters, brick and mortar, office space. I'm hearing a lot of the same thing on the commercial side. A lot of the businesses are innovating. So you have the streaming movies, you have streaming music, all that type of stuff is going to continue to happen. And I think that's important. But that is going to have a major impact on the theaters. And that those very well, having to spend $20 to go watch a movie. I don't remember the last time I've gone to a movie. There just hasn't been a movie worth spending $20 to go watch. Brick and mortar, I think tying that into basically office space, brick and mortar, the businesses have to be able to come back, so that will be very interesting to see. I have a feeling you're probably correct largely on that. Office space, I've already heard the conversations. I have, just in the real estate realm, I know that we're going to go from a 3,000 square foot office down when the lease expires here. I know quite a few other major agents, large top producing agents in San Diego that have already shut down their doors and like, we're out. No, thanks. We don't need to spend this money. We're more productive at home. So I think you're going to see a lot of that, people just walking away from leases. Have you started to see any of that, just walking away from leases?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not too much. Well, my daughter's a good example. She's at this private university in Miami, and she's wrapping up her master's in occupational therapy. And they closed the campus down. And I don't think my daughter's an exception, but a lot of schools, as you know, most all schools went online. And she had a lease that took her through the end of September. And she's back home now with us taking classes online. And they don't know when the school's going to reopen. So I negotiated a buyout. It wasn't really a buyout, but I helped her negotiate a pretty much buyout on her lease.
Mm-hmm.
And the landlord agreed to accept the security and the last month's rent and let her walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she saved some money there. So again, she's not an exception. I think a lot of people are doing, a lot of kids, a lot of students who had leases, are in this situation. So that's just one example.
Yeah. Well, that ties into the fourth point that you brought up with that would be the residential investment properties, their income properties. If those are starting to become vacant and there isn't a high prospect for those coming back, those are going to get unloaded, put back on the market for sale potentially. What are you seeing in that regard? Do you have some more thoughts to share on that?
I haven't seen any. Yeah, I haven't seen anything come up yet. But in some investors I've been talking to, I read this national report that one of my investors gave me, and that was one of the areas that they touched on, was that we're going to see some opportunities. They hit on all the ones I discussed, and that was interesting about some multifamily properties. We also have to think about some of these landlords who have other properties or assets somewhere else that are suffering right now, and they need to unload some properties maybe for cash. So if they've got a piece of property that's not performing, and you've got tenants that aren't paying, or trying to negotiate, a smaller amount, um, you could see some flexibility there. I currently have an apartment site land in escrow, and this whole COVID-19 has slowed things down. All your agencies, your government agencies at cities are closed, and they're working out of their homes right now. So we had a due diligence period for him to investigate before he went hard with money, and that was supposed to happen in 45 days, and we're into our 90th day now because it's so slow to get the cities to respond, to all your questions, or if you turn in a design for a building, they're just not there to help you anymore, and it takes weeks instead of days. So fortunately, I'm a very sophisticated and patient seller. So he's been
Right.
granting us the extension. So we're not the only one in that situation. That's for sure.
Right, right. I think what will be interesting to see with the investment properties that people have, one of the big differences between 2008 and what we have today is every level of government stepped in immediately. Federal, state, county, city, whether it be for small businesses, whether it be homeowners, whether it be renters. And so I know some of those are set to expire at the end of the month. I know that some of them have been extended into June, July, and I think there's even some LA, I think, is into August at this point. So I think as long as renters are going to be continued to be protected by city, state, county, whatever it is, government, figuring out how they're going to stack that on the back end of somebody's lease, that could forego the flood of properties coming on the market due to renters not being able to pay. At some point, the unemployment rate will come down, whether it be Q3, Q4 into 2021, and people need a place to live. So that, I think that if the city, if the county, if the state can't continue to provide that coverage for renters, and basically if they're going to miss 2 months, 3 months worth of rent, whatever it may be, to extend the lease that long, or however they're working that, if they're going to be able to continue to do that, I don't think we're going to see a massive fire sale of investment property. If that protection expires and all of a sudden come July 1st, everybody in San Diego is told, pay rent, there's going to be a large number of people that are going to simply not be able to make that happen. They're going to be out. And then the question is, are the owners, the investors, going to be able to bring in another tenant, or are they going to be sitting there with a property for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and ultimately have to unload it? What are your thoughts on that?
No, they're good thoughts. I can't argue with that. There's been talk out there about Congress extending the benefits to the end of the year for
Good.
unemployment. They're talking about it, whether it's going to go through or not, but there is going to be another stimulus package. I told my daughter, I said, honey, you're going to be paying for all this,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, millennials, but we had no choice. The government had no choice but to help out and to, we're trillions into debt right now. One of the few countries, if any, that can print money. We need it, and we're doing it. But
Yeah.
we have to help people out. We got to get people back to work. I just don't think it's going to be a real quick recovery. I just think it's going to linger for a while. Yes, I think the unemployment numbers are going to come down. I don't know if we're going to see 3.5% unemployment anytime soon.
Yeah, I think that we're going to be into 2021 at least before we get down to that level.
I agree. And if this thing, it does take longer to recover, then all the more reason why Congress should, approve another stimulus package.
Yeah, I think at some point they will. We'll see how that goes. I think that
We'll see.
it will be interesting to see. At some point, all the truth and all the data comes out. It is, at this point, people, organization groups, good luck on hiding something. There is just entirely too much online. And so I think that once the data set's large enough and people that are trained to do this can look at the data, can look at the health data, everything that I'm seeing is the mortality rate is less than the flu. So is that the actual case? I'm not an immunologist. I do have 2 master's degrees in science, but I'm not an immunologist. So it'll be interesting to see, in terms of what I think needs to happen. I think there's 2 things. First, Congress has to take action and pass some sort of liability protection for businesses, whether that be for professional sports teams to have fans, whether that be for universities to have students come back, restaurants to go to more than 50%, whatever it may be. These businesses are going to have to be protected from this. The ambulance chasing attorneys are already lining up and getting ready to sue anyone and everyone that they can if anyone possibly becomes ill because they went into a shop or a restaurant. So I think step 1 of this has to be the liability. And then at that point, once that's in place, I think you're going to see a governor from one of the 50 states, maybe Florida, maybe Georgia, maybe Alabama. Who knows? They're going to find someone is going to have to stand up when the liability protection is placed and say, all right, ladies and gentlemen, here's the deal. If you're over 75 and you need shelter in place, sorry, we hit the pause button for 3 months for you. We can't continue doing this. If we hit this for another 2 months, when we hit the restart button again, there's going to be nothing left. So I think that guidance is going to have to be given. They're going to have to tell people that are 55 to 75, if you have underlying conditions, you better be darn well aware of what you're doing. You better shelter in place, potentially wearing masks, social distancing, etc. I think once you get under 40 to 55, underlying conditions, same type of advice. Under 40, there's very little evidence that this is having an impact. There are obvious one-offs. There are horrific stories of people that are losing their life over this. That is a one-off. That is less than 1% of 1%. So I think that's basically what's going to happen. The sooner that happens, I think the faster the economy is going to get going again. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on the age. My wife is a nurse practitioner at UCSD, and she's in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm probably a little more informed, as a non-professional.
Mm-hmm.
But the COVID-19 is hitting everybody, all ages. Yes, if you've got chronic conditions, if you've got some underlying chronic condition, regardless of your age, you definitely are impacted. Your immunity system definitely weakens naturally as you get older. So yes, the elderly is more fragile and they need to be protected. But getting back to owners of restaurants, for instance, you're absolutely right. A lot of them, they want to open, they need the money, and they want to get back to business as usual, but they've got a huge liability if anything happens. And
Yep.
that's why, and we've all read in the paper, a lot of them are not ready to open. They're saying, I'm really concerned because if somebody comes in here and I haven't done everything I'm supposed to do, and they come in and they're not wearing a mask or something, and they get COVID-19, I could be sued, and then they're going to shut me down. Or too many people come in. There was a place in Mission Beach, a restaurant, overcrowding last weekend. They opened up, health department shut them down because
That
they
was
weren't
El
compliant.
Perez, right? Yeah, they
So
were
you've
open
got a
in
lot,
New
yeah.
York.
You've got a lot of employers out there that are being very cautious too, before they open up. So that's why I say this thing isn't going to turn around, turn around like we saw it anytime soon.
Yeah, yeah,
It'll
for
get better.
sure.
No, the unemployment numbers definitely will come down. I'm still I've been in the residential profession for 50 years, so you know you have to be optimistic to survive this long.
Yeah.
But in all my experience, um, I'm optimistic about the residential market. Uh,
hmm
San Diego's still a great place to live. People want to be here, so
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Well,
I'm
let's.
not overly concerned there. Okay.
Yep. No, I got you. I got you. All right. All good points. All good points. I enjoy the conversation for sure. So, all right. Well, let's move on. Let's get talking a little bit about housing now. This is going to be some of the newer data that's coming out. So this is Zillow's report from May 29th. 40 and this is national, 40.8% increase in newly pending sales month over month. 37.8% increase in new listings taken month over month. This is May. So Zillow economists expect sales volumes reached its bottom in early April and expect sales volume to rebound strongly in May. Sales are forecasted to recover almost fully by the end of the year. So that's a national approach to this. All right. So looking at San Diego in particular, let's get into some of those numbers. So again, this is residential. All right. So we have finally gotten to a point in the last couple of weeks where we have enough data that we can actually go from a line graph to a bar graph, as it may be. And so we have the new data point that has come in here for this past week. We can see in gray, that's the month of April approximately. And we know that right about where the cursor is, somewhere to the left side, left portion of that third column is where the March 19th is. That was the stay-at-home order. All right. So when that happened, that week, we had taken 102 new listings. We took absolutely fewer for the next 5 weeks, the 29th, the 5th, 12, 19, and 26. Once we got to May, those numbers turned around. And that is a very good sign here in San Diego County. All right. This is the entire county. Keep that in mind. All price points throughout the county. All right. So we are seeing more and more people coming back, engaging the market with properties to sell. That is a wonderful, wonderful data point. The other interesting part, take a look at where we were here in March. February, bouncing around that same general area, right? We have been under inventory or low inventory the entire year. We actually entered the year with a historically low number of properties for sale since they've been tracking this in San Diego County. So when we go to the number of showings, right? So this data is from showing time. This is the entire state of California, all right? And so orienting you on the graph on the far left, that is basically going to be on January 12th, that's our zero. All right. And so as we go through the year, what are showings looking like in California? We saw them gradually increasing up until the beginning of March, and then they came down. That's when the pandemic officially was declared. The stay-at-home order came shortly thereafter. Showings simply shut down. Everybody hit the pause button. From approximately the end of March up through today, we have seen all of that recover and come back. So these are home buyers in the state of California that are out actively requesting to see properties. Here's the important data point. This number where we are for the last 2 to 3 weeks is higher than it was pre-coronavirus. So a lot of the questions and concerns about when is the real estate market coming back? It's back, ladies and gentlemen. There's the data point right there that shows you. I can go back to the previous slide, and the next slide is going to confirm it one more time for you. So home buyers are out. They're looking. There's just nothing for sale. All right. So when we take a look at the pending transactions, All right, this is good news also. All right, so when we're again looking somewhere around that third bar, that's when the stay-at-home order came. Pending sales, meaning an offer was accepted, house was taken off the market, escrow was opened. We see the drop down. The low point was the very beginning of April, about 2-3 weeks into this. All right. We then see a steady, very nice increase throughout the remainder of the weeks that we've gone through. All right. So on March 15, we had 109 homes that accepted an offer, went into escrow. This past week, the week of the 24th, we finally exceeded that number. All right, so that is wonderful news for everybody that is potentially looking to buy, potentially looking to sell. The number of offers, the activity, the actual pen to paper with an offer has finally got back to above where it was. So more great news. So here's some more quotes and some info. So this is Mark Fleming, chief economist for First American. Historically low mortgage rates, as well as new technology that allows buyers to house hunt from afar, seems to have lifted the housing market from April's low point. The housing market is showing early signs of resilience amid the pandemic. Another quote from Mark: monthly data that looks back 3 to 4 weeks is old news. We know from the faster moving data, mortgage applications, showings, bidding wars, that April really was the trough. I think for the housing market, the existing home sales numbers show that now, I think I mistyped that one, but we do not expect the rebound to be quite strong. I do not expect the rebound to be quite strong in the month of May numbers. I'm going to move on because I apparently cannot read, but I think we get the general point. Holy cow. All right. Here's one by Robert Dietz. Let's see if we can get a little better at reading here. So the National Association of Home Builders, he's a chief economist there. Overall, the data lend evidence to the NAHB's forecast that housing will be a leading sector in an eventual economic recovery. Consider that despite the recent weakness, new home sales are reported to be 1.4% higher through April than the first 4 months of 2019. All right, now keep something in mind. San Diego County, not a tremendous amount of building going on. Not a lot of building going on in California. And then, Mark, we do have a question about that was sent in, so we'll get to those at the end. I really would like to get your take on that when we get to the Q&A. When we're talking about home sales in general, nationally speaking, very good data point. We had just previously gone through the San Diego data. All right, here's the last one, one more quote. Dr. Frank Nothalf, chief economist at CoreLogic. Look for the housing sector to recover before the rest of the economy and lead other industries into expansion. All right. Could be absolutely great if that happens. All right. Here is the senior research associate with the Joint Center of Housing Studies at Harvard. The housing industry has often led the economy out of recessions. Just because recessions lead to a decline in interest rates that lowers borrowing costs for both home buyers and builders, which makes home buying more attractive and spurs home building and the many released durable consumer good industries that drive GDP growth. So another good, solid data point. All right, Mark, I want to get your opinion on this graph here in a second. All right, so this is residential fixed income percentage share of GDP growth during the last 5 recessions. All right, so this is talking about spending on housing. So this is new construction, and this is resale of existing homes. So for a historical average, 3.7%. Every time that we've seen the last 5 recessions, we have seen a massive expansion in GDP when it comes to spending on housing. Mark, what say you? Mark, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still. I'm not going to argue with the graphs. It is interesting to see this, and I agree that the housing market is going to recover, and it may be that sector that's going to take off faster and before any of the other industries. My only concern, and I'm told you I'm optimistic. My only concern though is how these lenders are going to qualify, how these buyers are going to be able to qualify. Yeah, they're out there looking, and like I said, if they've got some strong FICO scores, I mean, I'm just talking about some of the big banks are changing their criteria.
Mhm.
What does scare me is one lender out there saying, I'll take your income on stated income. That got us in trouble. But that's an exception.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, I think
but yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, I think you this is the second I didn't go to it the first time you brought it up. You brought the banking up again. So there you can go back to anyone who's watching this, you can go back to the last couple episodes where we dug into this a little bit. What Mark has been saying is absolutely the truth of what's going on the ground. It started with Chase, where they increased the FICO score that was minimum FICO score. They increased the requirements across the board. In general, what I'm hearing is that anything that is over the county conforming loan limit, which in San Diego County is $701,000, anything that's over that gets into the jumbo loan, and that is becoming very, very difficult to get. Credit scores well above 700, minimum of 20 to 25% down, and it just is exceptionally difficult over the last 2 or 3 weeks to get one of those jumbo loans. The people that are under the county conforming loan limit, so under that, call it 700K, they're seeming to not have the problems that the jumbo loans are. Are you seeing anything or hearing anything about that?
Not too much. I mean, you're more of an expert in this arena than I am. I'm more the commercial, and I'm always in touch. I'm always on the ground floor with my home builders and investors. But you're talking about $700,000 loan. Um, Home price, that's an affordable.
Yeah.
That's an affordable amount. We don't see those prices along the coast anymore. Um,
Right.
but we do. We got a major housing shortage here in San Diego. We always have. We are way under, and that's good for a buyer if you can find them. You can find the homes that you can afford.
Yeah.
I know where I live. You put a sign up and it's gone. House is in escrow, right here along the coast. So there definitely are buyers out there.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
no doubt about it.
The buyers are just stacked up like airplanes waiting for their turn to land, and there's just nothing available. So yeah. All right. Well, let's keep going on. All right. So a few more quotes here. This is Diana Olick with CNBC. New home sales rose slightly in April, defying expectations of a huge 22% drop. Not sure what expectations she was looking at. She wasn't watching this show.
No,
If
she
mortgage
wasn't.
demand is an indicator, buyers are coming back to the housing market far faster than anticipated, despite coronavirus shutdowns and job losses. Nationally, okay. San Diego, they've been here. Last one, mortgage demand from the home buyers show unexpectedly strong and a quick recovery. The quick recovery has surprised most forecasters. Interesting to know who she's looking at and what she's saying. So there's some more info, CNBC right there. All right, so here's the bottom line. The housing market is in a position, in my opinion, to pull the economy out of this repression. The buyers are ready. They're there. I can tell you this personally. I got 15 to 20 buyers that are stacked up simply waiting for either something to come on the market that they like, or they're waiting. They have fears about the coronavirus. And that is something that I am not trying to work them through. That is a very personal decision, and I support that for anybody who wants to push the pause button on anything they're doing. Kind of like what you were saying, Mark, there's, the people that have family members that are at risk. How quickly are they coming back? How quickly are they going to be willing to engage? So as I'm seeing it, if you own a home out there and you've had any thoughts of selling, if you want to move up, if you want to move down, if you would like to help pull the economy out of where we currently are, put your house on the market. It's going to sell. It's going to sell quickly. So, all right, that's what I got for today. Mark, let's go ahead and get to the Q&A. All right. Let's me find them. Mark, I think your camera's turned off.
Oh,
There we go. I know that we don't want too many ladies getting overly worked up over you on the screen, Mark. So, all right, here's what we got for some questions, just a few of them today. Mark, let's start with one for you. Why are they not building more homes in San Diego if we're so underbuilt?
Land. There's not enough of it. When I started in Temecula back in the 80s, and just overabundance of land, and those were just incredible days. And I've focused in San Diego probably for the last 20 years, 25 years, specializing on coastal properties. And there really are no large subdivisions left. Number of factors. As if we've all followed the news and we've seen what happened to a number of these master plan communities. New land development up there in Escondido got shut down. It's a real tough situation out there right now because these developers, want to build homes. They want to build some affordable homes. A good portion of the development, is going to be, some affordable product in there. But you've just got, I hate to use this word, but it's true. You got a lot of NIMBYs out there that just don't want a development in their backyard. And the development community is scared to death right now about taking a map out for public vote if they can't get city council approval. We saw that happen in Newland. We saw it happen to Lilac Road out there in Valley Center. Number of projects are in trouble, and they probably won't get built. Look what happened to Zephyr Partners in Del Mar on their big hotel project. They had to go out to the public and it got shut down. So there's a shortage of land because there isn't any land left. And the only land left is East County. And trying to get the zoning out there for high density, medium density, it's a major challenge. And a lot of developers don't want to go through the headache and then run the risk of going out for a public vote and getting turned down after they've spent millions of dollars in option money and entitlement money. So here along the coast, there just isn't anything left. There's maybe a few old nurseries left, nothing of significant size like we saw 10, 15 years ago. And as the land prices went up, so did, the cost of the buyer. So I think we're starting to see some realistic sellers. They may have other properties that they're in trouble with, and hopefully they'll get realistic. But I call it an educational period for them to understand, if they're overpriced. So we don't have any land. We have a shortage of land. That's why we have a shortage of housing.
Yeah. What is it that you're seeing that could be changed, could be modified to start repurposing areas that are not, and let's say not East County, let's say, central San Diego, San Diego proper, further up the coast. What are you seeing that would need to be done to start repurposing properties or land that is zoned for commercial, zoned for industrial? What potential do we have in that regard?
Well, because there's very little land left, and especially along the coast. And it's a good word to use, repurposing. I see developers trying to get into these urbanized areas, higher density areas, and the cities, I feel, need to relax their codes, and especially building heights. The city of San Diego has gotten very aggressive about density and how high you can go. And you can build downtown right now without even having parking requirements, as long as you are very close to public transportation. We need that. We need more of that. If you've ever been to Vancouver, there's a good example of good planning. You go to the city, they got high rise and everything, but if you go out to their subdivisions, you go out to their communities, you also see more high rises, businesses. So they've been very good about work living in the same community. I'd like to see more of that here. But again, you've got people who live here along the coast and they don't want a 4, 5, 6 story, multifamily building next to them. It's a real challenge.
Yeah.
You can't go east because of zoning changes and having to go out to the public for a vote, and then trying to get the property owners in the cities to relax the building heights so you can put more units in there. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's almost catch-22. Yeah.
For sure. All right. Let's get the next one. All right. This one is, how has the housing market shifted with the pause button being hit for the last 2 months? I think that in general, we've pretty much walked through that today.
Yeah.
It absolutely, it was a pause button. The people that were buying and selling properties were ones that needed to buy and sell properties. That's the people that we're working with, that were out actively selling properties, helping them buy. That's basically what we're seeing. We've been covering this for a while. So that's a pretty straightforward one. Let's do a few more.
Let
Yeah, go ahead.
let me say that you hit on this point. Yes, you being in the residential sector really need to do, and all of you in that profession need to get out and get word out. I'm very encouraged by these graphs that I saw today, because I'm not in the trenches in the residential single-family homes like you are, but it sounded very encouraging. And yeah, you've got some sellers actually took their properties off the market, from what I heard. They were scared. Oh, there's no buyer out there, and I don't want to sell right now. Well, so those people need to get those homes back on the market. And the data that you are sharing with all of us today, that needs to get out. People need to see that. Wow, this is a great time to put my house on the market because there are buyers out there.
Yeah.
So that was encouraging. Glad I saw that.
Yep. No, you're right about, we had probably 3 or 4 listings that they pushed the pause button as soon as this happened. And so they're slowly starting to come back on. I think 1 or 2 of them have been on and they're gone. So interesting. All right. Got a few more. When are in-person open houses going to resume? That's a great question. I would argue that they're good to go now as long as we have less than 10 people, but apparently the San Diego Association of Realtors disagrees with me, or maybe I disagree with them. They definitely make the rules, not me. So when the local board says, okay, that's basically when I think we're going to be looking at it. I think that's coming into the liability issue there also. So that's relatively straightforward. Why aren't we seeing home prices drop yet? The last couple weeks, we really dug into that, but I'll give you the 2 easiest data points that I'm seeing. Number 1 is the home equity that people have, right? It's a number we've been talking about for a while. 177 grand is the average amount of equity in a home in the United States that has a mortgage. We take a 25% hit to that, which is 5% more than what we had in 2008. They still have $125,000 to $135,000 worth of equity. They are not walking away from that. The problem that we had in 2008 is people owed more on the property than it was worth. That's not the situation today. If somebody has $100,000 worth of equity in their house and they're in a position due to job loss or illness or whatever it is that they are not able to continue to make the payments, they're not going to let the bank foreclose on them. They're not going to short sale the property. They're going to call me. They're going to put the house on the market and they're going to sell it at market value. And they're going to take their 125 grand and move on. So we're simply in a very, very different position than we were going into 2008. Some of the others we're underbuilt, especially in San Diego. We've been talking about that here for the last 10, 15 minutes. But across the country, we are underbuilt. Right? So those are just 2 of the main ones. I think next week we'll have to get a lot more into that. So let's do 2 more. I'm going to do another short one for me, Mark, and I got a really kind of a longer one that I really want you to go on here for a second. So the last question that's kind of a general residential, how easy is it to get physically into a property to see? It really is up to the seller. It is something that is starting to get relaxed more and more, but it is 100% up to the seller. We're not seeing very many situations where somebody's going to have to write an offer in order to get in. I think we're seeing that pretty much above the $2, maybe $3 million price point. So that's kind of at where we're seeing with, how easy is it to get into a home? A lot of the virtual tour, the video tour, the 3D tours, the pictures, everybody's going to have to start there. drive by the property, take a look at the neighborhood. If it looks good, then we'll figure out how to make something happen. All right. So let's go. Last question, Mark. This is kind of, I'm going to just let you go on this. So you could go for probably 2 minutes or probably 20. Let's keep it closer to 5, maybe. So is it less expensive to buy land and build versus buying something that was already built? And if it's not less expensive, why on God's green earth do people do that?
Good question. Typically, it's not. There's a lot of factors in buying a lot and building a home on it. The cost of the dirt, one thing, and then I don't want to use the word entitlement because obviously the lot is zoned for a home on there already, but you've got to hire an architect, an engineer, you got to get a construction loan, just a lot of parts in there. Obviously you have to qualify. You probably are looking at least 200 to 250 a square foot for sticks and bricks for a new home. If you wanted some nice stuff in it, just to give you an idea, that's sticks and bricks. If you hire a general contractor who will go out and hire all your subs, then that costs more. So typically, I think it's more economical unless you want a brand new home, design it by yourself, and just the way you want it. It's cheaper to buy an existing home and maybe rehab it. I think, or a new home that a builder just did, that just built a small subdivision if you can find it. There's still a couple good opportunities out there, but I've run the numbers on. I have a good friend of mine who's always out there looking for a piece of dirt for us to build a duplex or fourplex, and every time I crunch the numbers, it based on what the seller's asking, it doesn't make sense. By the time we factor in, the cost to design it and build it out and get a loan on it, we were better off finding an existing one. So it's not always the most efficient way from the ground up.
Yeah. Right. Now I have a couple clients that are actively, one is very much into building a dream house, and she's looking at something that's 10 to 15,000 square feet, which not a whole ton of those floating around here. I have another couple other clients who are very interested in land. All three of them wanted to take a very, very interesting approach to making this process happen. And so here, let me share with you how I counseled them, and then you tell me how you would modify this if I should go back and modify my guidance to them. So a lot of them simply started by going, I want to find a piece of land. And that was step number one, to which I counseled them that needs to probably be step number 3, right? Step number 1, if you're building a dream home, you need to hire an architect. They need to actually design the dream home for you. And that's going to cost you, if you're actually going full custom, $10, $50, $100,000 for the architect. You can buy pre-made plans online for, a home that's already been designed for a couple grand, right? But here's the other part that people aren't understanding. That $50,000 you're paying an architect to design your dream home, you can't finance that. That's out of pocket. And then the second step that I'm telling them is, you have the plans, now go find a contractor and a designer and determine what you actually want in the house. What do you want? The cool quartz countertops? What type of flooring do you want? What type of windows? What is the house actually going to be built of? And that, again, that's not going to be a huge expense necessarily, but that is 2 things that have to be done. You got to know what the house is even going to cost. And then from there, let's go find a piece of land that we can build that on, right? And then it's into applying for loans, right? You have the loan for the land, and then you have the loan for the construction loan. And through that entire process, you're basically going to have to write a business plan that you're going to hand over to a bank, because they're going to underwrite every single person that's involved in this, from the architect to the designer to the builder to the contractor to the subs to the buyer. And once you get through all that, okay, cool. Now you can buy the land and build the house. So you tell me, am I on the right track? What am I missing there?
No, you're not missing a thing. You're absolutely, you hit it right on the button.
Okay.
There's a lot of parts involved, and I would not recommend anybody go out and tie up a piece of land until they've done their own underwriting on what you just mentioned. You don't go out and tie up a piece of land and then go out and find your architect, find your engineer. I built custom homes back in the early 80s, and I finished up after a couple of years. I moved there. This is when interest rates were 17%, but I moved to a ski resort in New Mexico called Ruidoso, and I built some beautiful custom homes back there. And I found some really nice drawings from a book. So instead of hiring a draftsman or an architect, which would have cost me a small fortune, I got one of those books and I found some gorgeous brick and glass homes. It cost me a couple $100, and I gave it to a draftsman, and he got those plans from the company, and it saved me a lot of money. I mean, you could do that. That is something to consider. But absolutely, don't start with the land. Go out. If you really want to build a custom home, go find an architect, find an engineer, go to the city, find out what the fees will be, what we call impact fees. Your building permit, sewer permit. You got all those little, what we call impact fees. Get those numbers together. Like you said, you got to put a budget together. You got to underwrite this thing. Put a marketing plan together, and hopefully you're qualified to go out and get a construction loan. Yep. Then you got to go out. Then you got to figure it. In my business, in the construction business, this is how a builder evaluates what they're going to pay for the land, what they can afford to pay for the land. They say, okay, we're going to build these homes, X square footage, and this is what the cost is. It's considerably less than what a single individual person would go out and pay if they hire a general contractor. These builders, when they build in volume, they get big discounts. You're maybe 150 a square foot versus 200. And what they do is, so they'll go ahead and say, okay, we can build, this is what the cost of the home is what we're going to be selling it for. Here's what the cost of the land is to improve. We call site improvement costs. So that's to take that raw piece of dirt and turn it into a finished lot, a finished subdivision with all your backbone and everything like that. So they add up all those costs. That will tell them what they can afford to pay the land. That will tell them what the residual land value is. And that's what somebody that's looking for an individual custom home has to do. Get all those costs up front, and that'll tell you what you should be out there looking for, what price point for the lot. You start there instead of finding the lot first.
Yeah. Now, what do you say? So I explained this to one of the 3 clients that I was mentioning, and she came back with, and this was not the massive, 15,000 square foot home. They're aiming at, I think, somewhere around the 5, maybe 6,000 square foot. So definitely a big home. They are okay with having a smaller house, maybe even down to 2,500, because what she said is the location is the most important. They want to find a piece of land, and then they're willing to build what they can on that, which is an interesting approach. What would be a couple of the big pitfalls that you've seen in your experience taking that approach to it?
I don't think that's the way to go. I mean, you spend $1 million on a lot, to build that size home, and then you decide, what, we don't have the money to build a 5,000-6,000 square foot home. Maybe we should build it. We can only afford to build a 25. We may not be able to build a 2,500 square foot home because the CC&Rs. First thing that came to my head when you mentioned you've got a client 6,000 square foot house. Del Mar Mesa is a beautiful place. It's been very active. I brokered several subdivisions up there, and there's some beautiful big 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 square foot homes up there. You're going to pay a lot for the dirt for the lot if you can find it, but then you got to build a big home, is what I'm saying. That area is conducive to those kind of homes. You can't go in and build a 25 or 3,000 square foot house up there.
That'd be interesting if someone tried to pull that one off.
Yeah, I know.
Build a small little 1,500 square foot.
I hate to see someone build $1 million, spend $1 million on a lot, and then all of a sudden they're told, sorry, you can't build that house that you had planned.
Yeah, no, that's actually Del Mar Mesa is one of the 2 or 3 areas they're most interested in. So yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I like it.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mark, I think we're coming to an end. Is there anything you want to add here as we're coming to an end?
Not really. After looking at your charts today, I was pleased to see that the single-family residential sector is bouncing back. I'm still very bullish and optimistic about San Diego, and I concur with you that I think the housing market is going to get us out of this, help us recover quickly. It's going to be the leading, you know, profession that's going to get us going. So I'm optimistic about that. I just on the commercial sector, we're gonna see some.
See a little bit of a bloodbath, maybe.
Yeah, I see a bloodbath in some areas. I really do. But you're doing well, and I think you're going to continue doing well. I always have a shortage of land myself, so I'm always on the hunt for good land. My clients need land. There's a shortage of it.
I can
We
understand
need
that.
more housing. Need more affordable housing too. That's the problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All
Ryan,
right.
thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, you bet, Mark. I appreciate you taking the time out of your Friday afternoon and joining us. And so, all right, everybody, thank you very much. We'll get this up on YouTube ASAP. And if you guys have any questions for the next episode, send them in. We'll make sure we get on the replay that's going up on YouTube. We'll get all the contact info for Mark loaded up here periodically throughout the Q&A. That way you guys can get in touch with Mark if you need to. So, all right, everybody, thank you much. And we will see you next time.